coders are now asking it to solve coding problems, and it will actually write code that is functional. This is going to be even worse because now you have an artificial intelligence able to generate things in plain English that are often full of true information, but you don't know whether what generated it is some, brain-dead model or something else. That's one concern. And then the other concern is when we say, well, Chat-GBT doesn't know what it's saying. It's not conscious. We know it's not conscious because it's not programmed to have a consciousness. We are actually ignoring the other half of the story, which is that we don't know how human consciousness works, and we don't know how it develops in a child, right? A child is exposed to a world of adults talking around them, and the child experiments first with phonemes and then words and then clusters of words and then sentences. And by doing something that isn't all that far from what Chat-GBT is doing, it ends up becoming a conscious individual. And so I think it's clear that Chat-GBT isn't conscious. It couldn't be. But it isn't clear, to me at least, that we are not suddenly stepping onto a process that produces that very quickly without us even necessarily knowing it.
Oof. And what steps, if any, can be done to mitigate that at this point?
I wrote a paper, which I never published anywhere, in, I think, 2016 about this very issue. In fact, I used basically the argument that you could attain artificial general intelligence by imbuing computers with a childlike play environment for language and then exposing them to a huge data set, which is not exactly what's happened here, but it's in the ballpark. And I would argue, and I did argue, that one needs to build an architecture in which this can't get away from you, right? And so the architecture that I advocate for is actually a metamorphosis architecture, where metamorphosis is not allowed. It is an affirmative choice of humans. Let's say that we developed some artificial frogs to do some job, to clear some waterway of something. And we imbued them with an intelligence so that they could learn to clear the waterway better, but we worried that they might learn to do something that we don't want them to do, and that we would have no way of arresting it once these frogs were released in the wild and capable of producing more of themselves. But if what you say is, well, at the point at which you go from a tadpole to a frog, you have to ask us if you can go, right? There's no automatic transition from a tadpole to a frog. There are still dangers, right? In the case of GPT chat, I think some of the artificial intelligence existential risk folks would tell you that one of the dangers is that the chat AI could convince you to do its bidding, right? As you said, when you were looking at this, it felt like a person, right? And the point is, something that feels like a person can play on your emotions, right?